Hello everyone and welcome back. Today we'll be talking about the dynamic between 2D and 3D Zelda and what needs to happen in that department. I am excited for Tears of the Kingdom to an astonishing degree. I'm probably the first person you've heard this from, I know. And in addition, I know that when all is said and done, and I've played the heck out of the game, I will probably be exhausted. And make no mistake, those two things are perfectly reconcilable. There are many superb movies or books that leave you exhausted by the end. I'm currently replaying Breath of the Wild, trying to squeeze every inch of exploration I can out of the game, and that is certainly exhausting in some way, even if it's fun. Now imagine a game that takes that massive map, shakes it up so you want to explore it all over again, adds sky islands and caves, and probably even more on top of it. And I think it's hard to argue that it wouldn't be taxing, at least in some sense, even if it's also a phenomenal experience. You know what we'll need after Tears of the Kingdom? We need a new 2D Zelda game. Or if you prefer, a top-down Zelda game. I miss 2D Zelda. I love 2D Zelda's tight designs and puzzles, beautiful pixel art, their game worlds that are modest in size yet loaded with secrets and interesting traversal, their unique dungeons and bosses, their pacing, the list goes on. Our last new mainline game of this kind was 10 years ago. A Link Between Worlds. For over a decade, 2D and 3D Zelda games existed concurrently, but now there's been a decade-long drought in the 2D department. The complementary dynamic between 2D and 3D Zelda games was never something I wanted to disappear. It's something that should endure, in the same way that we have 3D Mario games and we have 2D platformer Mario games. We have the 3D Metroid Prime series and the 2D side-scrolling Metroids. I've always found it difficult to compare and rank the Zelda games of these two different formats, with each format having very different flavors, but that doesn't mean that each wasn't objectively delightful in its own way. I want both flavors. 2D and 3D Zelda have different strengths that perfectly complement one another. The time between Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom has been 6 years. Think about this. Basically any other span of 6 years you could pick had more Zelda games than this. From 2000 to 2005, we got Majora, the Oracle games, Wind Waker, and the Minish Cap. If we're just including the truly mainline games, and not the Four Swords games or Hyrule Warriors or anything like that. From 2006 to 2011, we had Twilight Princess, Phantom Hourglass, Spirit Tracks, and Skyward Sword. I think the biggest gap before now was between Link's Awakening and Ocarina from 1993 to 1998. And I'm not saying I expect or even want that many Zelda games in a span of time like that. It just would have been nice to, have a fun little, easy to digest 2D Zelda game between Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. But because we didn't get that, I think Nintendo needs to capitalize on the opportunity they have for 2025, 2026 or so to provide us with a new 2D Zelda game with a shorter development time to tide us over. Now I understand that games like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom take a long time, but that's exactly why I'm saying Nintendo should have a separate team, or maybe a partially separate team, to develop littler games interspersed between 3D games that take less time both to develop and to play, and yet despite this low level of ambition, chances are it'll still end up being a wonderful, well-loved entry in this great series. I don't want us to have 69 Zelda games by the time I'm 80 years old. I'm just thinking maybe we could shoot for an original game every 3 to 4 years. Since AAA developers lately seem to think that more content is always better, we will likely have development times roughly 6 years long between the next few 3D Zelda games too. So 2D games are the ideal way to fill this gap. A little gem to put in the crown of the Legend of Zelda series. Doesn't need to be the crown jewel. Now I also recognize that they put time into the Link's Awakening remake to give some attention to the 2D side a little bit, but let's be real. 2D Zelda has too much potential and rich history to just be relegated to remakes only. What I'm talking here is original top-down Zelda games. We need more games like Minish Cap, Oracle of Ages, Link's Awakening, A Link Between Worlds, coming down the pipeline at least a couple times a decade. But let me get back to this whole idea of AAA developers feeling such a strong need to put absurd amounts of content in their games, because this attitude is important for the team that works on these 2D games to unlatch themselves from. I mean, I'm not able to look into these developers' heads, and I'm probably cherry picking. There's a lot of diversity in the game development scene, but I've just noticed this attitude in a lot of developers, or maybe the player base, that their game has to have content, enough content to fill the Atlantic Ocean, and the idea that a bigger map is always better. The idea that if a game takes 175 hours to fully experience, that's better than if it took 150. And if it takes 200 hours, that's better than if it took 175. I guess what I'm saying is that you can make a map engaging without it being absolutely sprawling, and that there's such a thing as burnout with a game, no matter how spectacular it is. And I think I'm starting to feel it with Breath of the Wild after about 90, 100 hours. I never really begrudged games like Twilight Princess or Majora's Mask that had sizable yet manageable maps that took 40 to 60 hours to 100% complete if you include the story, depending on if you're playing it at a leisurely pace or not. I mean, the less burned out you get with a game by the end of it, the more often you'll put in another playthrough of it. So, should these theoretical 2D games have passion, care, and craft put into them? Should they shoot to be a real winner? Yes, very much yes. Should they be concerned about innovating the industry, or should the developers be disappointed if their game only takes 40 or 50 hours to thoroughly experience? No. So in my opinion, this attitude of more always being better is something that will be damaging to the flourishing of these theoretical 2D Zelda games. Doesn't mean it can't have more to it than 2D Zelda games have had historically, just that the primary aim shouldn't be to make 100, 150 hour games. And again, I think it's great that Nintendo is shaking up and refining the industry with these 3D Zelda games lately, but they don't need to do that with every game. So anyways, that's what I want, and what frankly I think I'll need after Tears of the Kingdom is a new, simple 2D Zelda game in the tradition of classic 2D games of Zelda's past. Imagine what a wonderful palate cleanse that would be from after these latest two industry-shattering, endless possibilities, ultimate freedom-centric Zelda games. Imagine how much of a palate cleanse a new 2D game would be especially for me, where this will be my second time exploring the same Hyrule within the same calendar year, even if you include all the changes in Tears of the Kingdom. And I think Tears of the Kingdom will have a better ratio of story to pure exploration, so I don't think I'll end up as burned out, but this is still absolutely a strategy that I think Nintendo should consider, or return to, depending how you look at it. Creating new 2D Zelda games to see us through during development on the next big 3D game. I'm honestly not sure why Nintendo hasn't already implemented this, or hasn't continued to implement a plan like this. I guess their focus has been different with Zelda games on the Switch, perhaps. Now let me just gush for a second about the dream. The dream would be if Nintendo announced a new 2D Zelda game later this year, with a release date less than a year away. Mr. Aonuma comes on in a snazzy suit as usual and says, "We'd like to show you something new we've been working on for the Legend of Zelda series. We all think it's Tears of the Kingdom DLC, but kapow, it's a new 2D Zelda." That would be, for me, at the level of Metroid Dread for how earth-shattering it would be. But at the same time, part of me is like, it's almost impossible that Tears of the Kingdom and Age of Calamity are the only Zelda projects they've worked on these past 6 years, especially when Age of Calamity wasn't even the main Zelda team. So I half expect an announcement within a year or so. Also, I forgot to mention 2019 Link's Awakening remake, so obviously there have been other projects, just haven't been new mainline games. I've always had this idea in mind of a Zelda story where the Zoras are evil, or rather the villain was a Zora prince, and the Hylians are having to band together with the other races to defend against a siege on Hyrule Castle, while Link seeks out whatever artifact he needs to stop the prince in the meantime. There'd be a whole dynamic where most of the Zoras were loyal to their prince, with some dissenters. This image of Hylians catapulting a Goron into the battlefield as their allies. And with years of hindsight, I'm able to figure that an idea like this is probably way too specific to be the story in a big 3D game. But something like this is a story they could definitely tell in a smaller 2D game. I also have a gazillion cool sounding titles, so Nintendo needs to make more games so that they can use more of my title ideas. I mean, we've got Symphony of the Dawn, Exile of the Sages, Citadel of the Sky. Basically, stick Symphony or Citadel in front at the beginning of a title, and it'll sound cool. I don't actually have my list of title ideas in front of me, I just threw out a couple random examples I thought of for the script. So just to wrap up here, I'll leave you with my main thesis. Nintendo, you don't need to worry about innovating the gaming world with every new Zelda game. And remember, there are many people that love 2D Zelda and would pay you money to make some more of it. These games will 1. Have shorter development time, 2. Allow less time between mainline Zelda releases, 3. Allow you to do things that you maybe wouldn't have done in a 3D Zelda game, 4. Give you a way to scratch the itch of some fans for more traditional Zelda, so that you can focus on the open air philosophy on the next couple 3D games. But preferably not every single 3D for the rest of time is in the open air formula. But anyways, it doesn't need to reinvent the franchise. It doesn't need to try to rival Tears of the Kingdom. It doesn't even need to have a Link Between Worlds quality 2D graphics. It could look like Minish Cap, which still looks exquisite. It doesn't need to send tremors through the gaming industry. It should just exist and be a nice little new 2D Zelda adventure. And with that, I rest my case. I hope you all enjoyed, and I hope you all will be enjoying with me a shiny new 2D Zelda game one of these years. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed, and please do contribute to the discussion down below in the comments if you'd like. Until next time, everyone.